There's a moment in the tale of Genji, what is known as the world's first novel, or first known novel, rather, that reveals something important about how ancient Japan once understood spiritual force. And it is not symbolic either, or psychological for that matter, nor was it a poetic metaphor. Lady Rokujo is not performing sorcery or magic, nor consciously summoning anything. She is a woman carrying humiliation, jealousy, and grief that cannot be expressed openly without within the rigid structure of court life. That force does not dissolve and it doesn't fade. It condenses and it separates. It leaves her body and becomes what the Heian court calls mononoke, a possessing affliction that attaches to another woman and begins draining her life. The victim weakens, grows fevered, disturbed, and nearly dies, and no one in the world dismisses it as fantasy or superstition. Ritual specialists are summoned immediately because spiritual force is understood as casual reality. Emotion, especially without purification, becomes entity. Unresolved intensity becomes experiential presence. There is a thread running through folklore across every human culture, and it is not decorative or just stories. It is not entertainment, but warning. It is not metaphor either. It is a record of human encounter with the unseen, something that moves beneath the surface of ordinary perception, something that both illuminates, I'm not denying that, but it also unsettles, something that must be approached with reverence, discipline, and structural understanding. This was how it was understood not only in old Japan, but all over the world. Now for a more contemporary story. In the gloom of an ancient forest, a thunder of hooves erupts. A monstrous boar bursts forward, its body withering in inky black tendrils. This is no ordinary beast. It is a boar god turned demon, flesh corrupted by hate. Prince Ashitaka stands in its path, resolute and terrified. As the boar demon rages, its corruption latches out, black worms of curse energy coiling around Ashitaka's arm. With a final cry, the young prince loosens a deadly arrow and the demon collapses. The beast's hatred does not die quietly. In its death throes, it brands Ashitaka with a lethal curse. In that moment, Ashitaka is marked by spiritual pollution, an unclean force that seeps under his skin. It clenches his arm in pain and wonder, not yet fully grasping that the very energy fueling his strength now is killing him. His fate is sealed unless he finds a cure. The curse spreading in his flesh will surely destroy him. This gripping opening from Princess Mononoke from Hayao Miyazaki is more than just cinematic drama. It draws us into an old truth felt deeply in Japanese folklore. Spiritual force unpurified becomes a curse. The poor demon's raging power is a double edged sword. Immense strength born of hatred, utterly toxic to all life. Ashitaka's strengthened arm can slice through enemies under this curse. Yet that same cursed power feeds on him, a deadly fire that gives Ashitaka the power to kill, and it also kills him in the process. This scene sets the stage for our journey tonight. We're about to explore how folklore, illuminated by this film's imagery, warns of spiritual energies gone wild and why we ignore those warnings at our peril. What exactly is that black withering energy on the demon boar? In modern pop culture, we hear the term Reiki, and imagine gentle healing hands and soft light. But in the original Japanese sense, Reiki literally means spirit energy, a raw, potent force that can heal or harm. The very character Rei has been used for millennia to mean soul, ghost, or numerous spiritual force. And in fact, the Japanese dictionary, when you look up Reiki, it comes back as Mononoke. It is the unseen aura of the sacred or supernatural key in life energy, together as Reiki is the spiritual essence that flows through different parts of the world and the unseen. In Japan's oldest tales, this spirit force is ambivalent, pure and life giving when balanced, but terrifying when tainted by anger or corruption. The demon boar embodied Reiki gone wrong. Once he was Nago, a revered boar god shot by a human's iron bullet, poisoned by pain and rage. Nago's divine spirit turned into Atarigami, a curse-bearing demon. This energy was defiled, and sacred power turned malignant. When that defiled energy touched Ashitaka, it transferred the curse. In folklore, this idea is ancient. Japanese language and lore have long described such phenomenon. The word mononoke itself, as in mononoke hime, refers not just to monsters, but to invisible specter of spiritual energy. Centuries ago, people feared Mononoke as an unseen, mysterious energy that pervaded the deep forests, oceans, and mountains, a numerous force that could strike you dead like a bolt of lightning or a tidal wave. In one classical definition, Mononoke is written as Mononoke, the premier of all things. The spirit beneath, within, objects and creates. The mono in Mononoke refers to an unseen being, deity, or demon, and ki to its vital energy or aura. In other words, Mononoke is the very atmosphere of spiritual presence, what we might call raw Reiki in the wild. And when that presence is fueled by grievance or impurity, it becomes dangerous. Traditional Japanese sources painted Mononoke as deadly and fearsome. They were said to possess people, cause mysterious illness, even death. 1,000 years ago, before medical science, if someone fell ill or maddened, uh, aristocrats suspected the work of Mononoke, a malignant spirit aura affecting the victim. In the Heian era, if the rash disease struck, they described it as exnoke, the spirit of something at work. For example, as fever might be munenoke or mononoke, causing the sickness, spirit of the chest. They generally thought or believed, but as I know, it's more than that. An angry spirit's energy had permeated the person. Mononoke were essentially Reiki that had turned malevolent, evil spirits or wild kami that needed pacification. Historical records tell us the imperial court once outperformed elaborate rituals to appease and purify Reiki, not use Reiki to purify itself. In 853 AD, officials held the rite of Gaiki Shizebe, literally claiming the harmful spirit energy to ward off a devastating curse. They understood that spiritual force must be purified, raw power must be reconciled. Unchecked, it is like a plague wind. Only through prayers, sutras, and rites could the dark aura be cleansed or guided away. This is the backdrop against which Ashitaka's curse is cast. His plight, fighting an inner rage that is not his own, illustrates the old lesson that even the noblest soul can be defiled by Reiki, and that contamination must be healed, not harnessed. Folklore across cultures tells of this warning. Beware easy power, beware unearned strength. Yet often we do in the modern world. Do we truly listen? We marvel at the spectacle of a cursed prince wielding demonic strength and shrug it off as fantasy. We dabble in spiritual practices and speak of energy casually, often ignoring the cautionary side of the tales. The word Reiki today is marked as a benign healing modality. Few remember, though, its literal meaning, spirit aura, or consider that drawing or an unknown spiritual forces might carry risk if done without respect. We tend to cherry pick the comforting parts of spirituality, light without shadow, power without price. In doing so, we risk forgetting the old wisdom that power is never free. This isn't just a Japanese idea either. Nearly every folklore tradition has stories of gifted power turning on the user or spirit supernatural boons that backfire. We should remember these tales, for the patterns repeat themselves even now. For example, in European legend, Faust bargain with the devil grants him knowledge and power, but it dooms his soul in the end. In English folklore, a mummified monkey's paw offers three wishes, but each wish twists into a nightmare, teaching that what is easily given can be dearly paid for. In Greek myth, Icarus flies with wings of wax, a human granted godlike freedom only to plummet to his death when his ambition outruns his wisdom. Our modern audiences applaud these as entertainment or label them as cautionary tales for children. But the warning is meant for all of us. Power unchecked, power taken without understanding becomes peril. Whether it's technological power ravaging the environment or spiritual power toyed with ignorantly, the old stories urge restraint and humility. In Princess Mononoke, the forest god's power heals, but the same power's wrath curses. It is a balance modern minds often dismiss as superstition. We prefer to think we're above such things, that we control nature, that unseen forces are fanciful. Yet the folklore persists, whispering that some truths are timeless, not to be scoffed at. When Ashitaka is told to journey with eyes unclouded by hate, it's not just for him, it's for us. A reminder to remain pure of heart when grappling with forces beyond our ken. And so here we are, folklore after dark. Why after dark? Because in the dark, away from our neon distractions and daytime confidence, these old truths regain their voice. After nightfall, we feel the weight of mystery again. We remember that for most of human history, after dark was when the stories came alive, when the village gathered by the fire to hear of vengeful spirits and protective charms, when the unseen world pressed closest. This show is called Folklore After Dark because we venture into the shadows of folklore with respect and reverence. We shine a lantern, we shine lantern light on those tales of warning and civilization. In its hubris, tends to forget when the sun is high. Tonight, by invoking the opening of Princess Moke, we rekindle a serious conversation about what our ancestors tried to teach us. We're peeling back the layers of animation and fantasy to find the old heart of caution beating underneath. The curse of the boar demon is a dramatization of something real. The belief that moral and spiritual pollution have consequences, that rage and violence can echo in the very fabric of the spirit. Folklore After Dark exists to make sure those echoes are heard. In this space, we don't dismiss the ghost stories as mere superstition, nor do we exploit them for cheap thrills. We engage with them deeply and earnestly to see what light their darkness may shed on our lives. So, as we begin our journey into that darkness, that take a moment to let the lesson of Ashitaka's plight sink in. A blessing turned curse, a strength turned affliction. How many times in our real world have we seen a boon become a bane because of corruption or misuse? This is why we listen to the old tales. This is why we speak in hushed, respectful tones after dark, to remember the warnings our ancestors etched into story and song. Now, to guide us further down this path, I am honored to introduce Lee Morgan. Lee is a practitioner and scholar deeply versed in folklore and occult structure, someone who has spent a lifetime walking the borderlands between the seen and unseen. Lee understands the kind of Reiki we've been talking about, the raw, numerous force, and how it flows through the stories and rituals of cultures worldwide. The stage lights glow a little brighter, a mix of anticipation and solemnity in the air. Please welcome Lee Morgan to Folklore After Dark. Thank you, Lee, for being here.
Hi, how are you?
Good. I apologize that was so long, but I think it was something very important to start with. Usually, with my guest, I choose a story that's specific to their current and their place in the world. There's a notion that I'm like using like psychic vision to find out what that is because my guests think, how did he know that I know the story? But the reason why I know the story is because that's basically how folklore works. It it has a foundation within a current, whether the practitioner knows it or not, and it moves and drives forward into the modern era. Can you speak on that? But before you do that, can you introduce yourself a little bit more?
Sure. I'm Lee Morgan. I'm an author who is currently based in Nipaluna in La Troita, which is also known as Tasmania. I have also quite a strong connection to the West Country in England, and I'm very committed to the idea of storytelling as a way to put forward magic in the world. I feel that a story has to gain traction in some way, and that's, I guess, why I write nonfiction and fiction for that reason.
And you also practice witchcraft.
I do. Well, yes. I mean, that's what the magic is about.
Well, people don't really they don't understand that, and they don't understand what a witch actually is. They have their idea of it, but what's the reality?
I think it's a very broad word. Like, people use it to mean a lot of things, but traditional witchcraft is what I particularly connect myself with, and by my definition, that is something that partially chooses you. I don't necessarily think that you get the opportunity always to choose it. There is a kind of a lineage involved with traditional witchcraft, which is partially from other people, but also partially from spirits that sponsor you and lift you and have been there with you since the very beginning. And I see a lot of people come to it looking for it. And I think that I don't ever want to be that person to say it's not for you. I think that's up to the spirits. I don't think that's my call. So I'm not a big fan of gatekeeping. I tend to be more of a yes and kind of person than a yes no person. I think my definition of witchcraft is based on a lifetime practicing traditional forms and folklore. I very much believe in the notion of capital V virtue, that there is power passed down from having a technique passed to you by another human being. It's acquired a sort of what I call a red power about it. And yeah, witchcraft is definitely about sorcery and changing reality, but I think more importantly, it's about changing your own reality first before you start trying to bring that into the world. And I guess that speaks to some of the things in your story that you chose. You need to be grounded, I suppose, in your own perspective and your own view of the world before you can change the co-experienced world of other people, if that
Yeah,
makes sense.
it absolutely does make sense. And how much would you say folklore is important in terms of any path?
I think it's very important because there's this thing, I mean, I call it folkloric intelligence, but that's a term that I've sort of made up really to describe that feeling that you get when you repeat an action that other people have repeated from time immemorial. And there's kind of a power that builds up in that action, which is taught from their senses to your senses. It's not an intellectual thing, it's a sensory thing. And I think when you do that action, that folkloric action, you gain something you can't put words to, which is, I guess, why I sort of invented, I guess, that term folkloric intelligence, because I don't know how else to describe that. I think people knew so much in the past that we often don't credit them with because they were working off generations of repetition and they
Mhm.
received it from someone and that person received it from someone. And I have humility, I guess, towards that.
Yeah, that's why I think that, well, I mean, I always tell people that, the ancients or people that lived a long time ago weren't stupid. There's this idea that they didn't know anything, that they're just ignorant people that kind of just guessed at everything or invented things. And I don't think that's the case. How about
No,
yourself?
I don't think that's the case at all. I actually think that there is something missing from the group psyche at the moment, in this moment in history, that we desperately need to reclaim, which was known back then, which was known quite clearly.
I see it all the time because I'm able to purify and heal people to a high extent in a very, very strong way. I get often mo- welcome, I guess, or I have access to a lot of new age circles. So I'm able to walk into those and people don't feel unsettled or uncomfortable because of the words itself. However, the mechanics are very similar to any system of Western type of sorcery or witchcraft, in that it is for self refinement.
Mm.
I'm invoking the spirit. I'm not doing anything myself. One person at a New Age convention told me it's because I have unlocked DNA. But it has nothing to do with that. These are people I've noticed in these places where they are taking what they imagine the universe to be, when in when in the past it was something completely different.
Mm. Mm.
What's your take on that?
Um, yes, well, I would agree. I do think in the past it was something completely different. I don't think, I think there is a lack of humility. Like I was mentioning in the population, I don't think people realize how much we've lost in return for the rise of the Age of Reason. I think we have lost a considerable amount of faculties from our wholeness, our complete human entity. And I think witchcraft, for me, is the bearer of that information. It's the voices from a kind of subconscious aspect of Western esotericism.
Now, when people hear witchcraft, they think, oh, that means that this person is casting spells on people. What do you say to that? Can you speak on that?
I think it's a complex question because, yes, I mean, as a witch, you do cast spells and you sometimes cast them with other people in a group. But there's a bit more to it than that. I don't feel it's as simple as that. I don't think eh, getting the power to change consensual reality is something that requires you to do a lot of work on yourself first. And I feel that as you go along throughout that, you don't need to cast spells as often. It's almost as if things start to harmonize around you, and you can still do it, of course, but I think the need to do it becomes less frequent. And I I almost feel that your life becomes a spell. The stories that you tell become a spell, and everything becomes one in a way. Small things that you do have the potential to cast spells, and your definition of that term starts to broaden.
Right, so the reason why I bring that up is because people, like I said, they have preconceived notions of that. What would you say about the idea or of what people, might see online about witches maybe cursing the moon or like doing like love spells to each other and things like that. And I just want to start there, and I'm going to expand it outward.
It's the concept of cursing a being the size of the moon is sort of slightly humorous to me, to be honest. But look, yeah, people do all kinds of different sorcerous acts. I would actually say that speaking to another person and using your natural born charisma, for instance, can be a type of spell. I think people are using magic all the time without knowing that they are. And I do, yes. I mean, as I say, I'm a bit of a yes and person. I don't necessarily. I certainly wouldn't curse the moon myself. It's just it strikes me as rather ridiculous. But um, yeah, I certainly have been involved in casting spells in a conscious way.
So I wanna, I wanna kind of clarify things for people too. There are witches and people that do magic that only use it to try to harm others, but that's not how it's supposed to be. Um, what do you think, Lee?
Um, well, I think there is every type of witchcraft. To be honest with you, I don't
Mhm.
think it's
It's not just one thing.
yes, and I do think there are some types of sorcerers that it's more my theory than anything. I don't actually have an answer to that question, but I do have a theory about it. I do think that there are some types of sorcerers that automatically work with the necromantic current and with the
Hmm.
underworld, and that they do promote sort of darker powers, but I don't necessarily think that they are not meant to exist. I think that they've become a bit twisted though, like because of some of the systems of morality that we exist in this world. I don't think, yeah, saying that they exist just to do harm, I don't agree with that because it's harm to who? I mean, whether you mean harm to people or whether you mean harm to ecosystems or saving animals from humans or various other reasons people might do harm. I guess it's contextual is what I'm getting at. I
Hmm.
certainly don't believe that their witches are meant to just do harm.
Oh,
If
absolutely not.
mm,
No, absolutely not. Um, Let me see. Okay. What is, in your definition, a current? What is a current? You mentioned that. Can you explain
mm.
that to everyone, please?
Yeah, sure. That kind of has to do with what I was calling virtue, the idea that there is sort of a power that passes at a fleshly level between people and items, even like magical tools, things that are classed as being lucky, for instance, have a certain virtue to them. And the longer that they stay in human hands, the more powerful they become. So, belonging to a current is part of receiving a sort of a gift of some virtue from people that came before you who have decided not to take it to the grave with them, but to pass some of it down to another person.
And what is your background? Where did you learn and where did you grow up?
Well, I grew up in the Sydney area, but we went back and forth between there and parts of Dorset where my English family live. So I was sort of moved around between Australia and England quite significantly as a child because my mother's family is all based in Dorset. And there was a lot of extant folklore in my family. And I guess that had to do with the fact that um, a lot of the people in my family didn't suffer from a Western education. And I say that quite honestly, like in the sense that I actually do think there is some suffering to be had from receiving a full Western education.
I'm
Um,
going through it now myself, but go
yeah,
ahead.
I do. I've been through it too. And I recognize how it gets in the way in a lot of ways, that overthinking that didn't really exist, I suppose, in the way that my family were. They had sort of like a year eight education, like year eight in high school, I mean. Um, and so there just wasn't that overthink. So I was exposed to folklore early on and, received a sort of a bunch of what I classed as superstitions, which I, followed instinctually because my mother would tell me to. I mean, you'd be in the house and she would be like, don't put that on the table, someone will die, kind of thing, and you'd be like, oh God, okay, and you'd remove it. But yeah, witchcraft kind of came for me itself, which is sort of odd, really, because I felt it more when I have been in the West Country in England than I had in Australia. But after we moved to the bush, when I was probably about 12 or 13, in that sort of bracket, like in my early teens, maybe, I had some very strong encounters that, you know, they were so strong that I thought they were human. Like I met with spirits that I thought were people. And that shook me down quite a lot. I sort of, I guess, I went looking at that point and started to buy books and to try to search for what this practice was. And I think I knew it was witchcraft. I was always attracted to the images of witchcraft, just women flying on broomsticks and such.
Can you tell me about the spirits that you encountered?
Not in too much detail, just because there is a little bit of uh, I could tell you that they appeared on a horse and that like that was virtually impossible in the place where I was, like for there to have been a horse there and that their face was partly concealed. But I daren't go into too much detail on that one. But yeah, I had early encounters and I did see something on my lawn as a child as well that also had that feeling about it, that it was standing right there. Like it didn't seem like a ghost, it seemed like a creature. And yes, that got me on the path. I bought a lot of books on witchcraft, but it wasn't until I was in my late teens that I met some people that identified themselves as being witches, but specifically traditional witches, and that was where my path began. I've been with a couple of different teachers over the years that identify themselves like that, and yeah, I suppose that's my history.
So, what's the difference between traditional witchcraft and what you would say paganism and ceremonial magic? And can you explain this a little bit for everyone?
Well, yeah, I suppose that the main thing is what we were talking about with there being a current or a sense of virtue passed down. That element of it was very appealing to me because I had been dislocated from the West Country in England, and there was a very strong feeling around my family that I couldn't really fully have a connection to place if I didn't come home to Dorset. That I was sort of exiled almost in a way by being in Australia. Are you going to say
Does it
something?
yes, does this run in your family? This type of this current or
Yeah, yeah, it does. Yes, um,
okay.
yeah, um, yes, but I wasn't able to fully access that whilst being in Australia. But yeah, anyway, like traditional witchcraft is about the current, but it is also about a certain degree of continuity. Usually it's linked to place, like it comes directly out of the landscape that you're living in at the time. People are able to tell you that that hill there has this spirit in it and that bridge has this spirit in it, and they can tell you the stories of the place and how they've interacted with them and how that's been passed down to them. um, Traditional witchcraft often contains a sort of almost what's the word, almost like a collage on the surface of bits and pieces of what looks like dual faith observance, which looks like saints and looks like bits and pieces of Christian mysticism. But I sort of I argue with the term dual faith observance. I don't think it is a faith observance. I think it's a practical method for dealing with the whole of reality in a way.
Absolutely. And from your experience, are all these spirits benevolent?
No, no, they're not. Or you mean the ones we work with?
Well, I mean, not the ones that you work with, just around that you
Mm,
may have
no,
interacted.
mm,
So
no.
there's an idea within I would saw other currents that all spirits are either misunderstood or they're either benevolent or misunderstood. There's some of that, but it's not that. Would you agree?
um,
Well, you said no, so
yeah, I don't. Well, I mean, it depends what you mean by bad. I guess destructive might be a better word. Like, I
destructive.
think there is definitely destructive forces in the universe and people that use them to achieve destructive ends.
Hmm. Right. So that's what I meant.
Mm.
Okay. So I know my audience or people will want to ask, and they often do, what does like a witchcraft ritual look like? Because, like I said, in the popular culture, we get this idea of hidden government officials and dark hoods getting power from the devil and casting it out for whatever reason, or displaying a ritual on MTV. But as I always try to explain to people, there's really nothing there. Maybe perhaps other than some symbolism, but like power doesn't run in people that aren't traditionally attached to a current, as you explained it. Can you explain that a little bit? It's a complicated question for sure, but
Well, let's start with the first question about ritual. I think I don't know how much the people that listen to your show are
they know
sort of
nothing.
Okay. Okay. Well, let's talk about the devil then. Let's start there.
Mm.
Um, that force is something that means something different to us than what it means to Christians. Let's start there. To us, the devil is a form of completion. He is a monster of wholeness. He's something, he, she, something male, female, dark, light, everything all at once, if you know what I mean. He represents the full crossroads of human potential. He breaks rules, but he breaks them because he wants to obtain, his full magnificence, I guess. And when you see witches at a Sabbat, you wouldn't see as much as you would think, because a lot of the experience is seen with the witch's other eyes,
Hmm.
not so much what you can see happening in the circle. It might look quite boring to other people there, but there would be ecstatic experience where people, you might witness people dance until they fall down. But the real Sabbath happens outside the body. It happens once the people dance, drum, etc., themselves into a state where they're able to fly. And in that state, they twirl around and around and around and around until they go into the real Sabbath, which happens outside of that circle.
So, what
But
is
that
the purpose of a Sabbath?
to gaze upon the completion of your own possible persona in the future, I suppose, to dance around that pole, which represents that. When people are seen dancing around a figure of the devil, it's actually not about evil at all. It is about a creature that goes beyond human comprehension, which is animal, but also angel, which is everything at the same time.
So,
Future, past.
so basically, initiated witches in traditional witchcraft, the whole concept of the devil is something completely different than the Christian idea of it. Is that
Yeah.
correct?
Yes.
Because I know for a fact Lucifer, for example, wasn't even the devil in Roman religion. Lucifer was the star god, and that kind of hanged over um, against all the other gods from those pantheons, and just the Christianity adopted that one for some particular reason as their adversary.
Mm.
Um, so yeah, I don't know if you knew that or not, but that's uh
I think
that's a thing.
the
Well,
Lightbringer would definitely be one of the titles we would use for the Witch's Master, but he's called a lot of other things. Most people have some kind of local devil who is like a spirit of somebody who is amongst the mighty dead, who used to wear the horns in their life. There's steps between yourself and that entity.
and what would you say to spiritualists that say none of that exists?
um, okay.
That's just okay.
Yeah, that's
Well,
okay.
the
If
the,
that's what you
the
that's
well,
what you want to
well,
believe.
the reason the reason why I do this in this way is because I want to, educate people in other traditions that do other
Mm,
things that are clearly legitimate from my own perception, that I could venerate, kind of, or disseminate very easily, just because my own ability, and educate them too, so that they have a bigger picture of things. So that's my goal. And
mm,
that's what my audience kind of understands too.
mm.
So, okay is normally a good answer,
I
but
can't
I want
argue
you
with
to
that though, because someone who thinks that isn't true can't
perceive
perceive
it.
the
Uh-huh,
things that I
exactly.
can perceive. So there's no
Yeah.
point arguing to me.
Mhm.
I just
I,
accept that. I'm like, okay,
What
that's all right.
I've noticed when people do have a higher perception within their own current. If you explain them to if you explain them to them in a very eloquent way, they'll consider it. Then when you just tell them, hey, if you don't believe me, just take a look for yourself and try to observe it. And more often than not, they will be able to. Whereas some people in some places, who do have perception, higher perception, they may completely refuse to look at it, completely either out of fear or because they don't want something else to be true.
I
With it,
think though, I don't think that witchcraft is for everyone. I do think it is like something that you have to be called to in some way. That being said, the reason I talk about it and the reason I write about it and everything like that is whilst I don't think it's for everyone, I do think it contains some hidden wisdoms that might actually be really valuable at this point in history. I feel that that element of the shadow and the repressed underworld aspect of it and everything like that, I feel that that's rising up right now for a reason. I do think there is something to contribute, and I don't wish to convert people to traditional witchcraft. What I do wish to do is to share those things that I think our time has come to have that opportunity to share them.
hence why I wanted to have you on. Um, so I think you mentioned before folklore that isn't written down in any books. Does that exist in that tradition that you mentioned before?
Oh,
Or can you tell us some? Or can you tell us some
can I tell you
folklore?
some stuff that I know
Yes,
that's down in
yeah,
any
that
books? No.
well, I mean, if not in or in books, a lot of
But
it's very isn't well known. But can you tell us a folkloric story that has had impact on you and your practice?
hmm, oh, it's not well. Yeah, I can, but I they are written down. The ones that
Eh,
I could tell
Written
you.
down is okay too.
Okay. Um, there's there's one about um the spirit Crocker of the River Derwent in England, where he was said to take one soul each night, that there was certain conditions that would happen, a certain storm that would come up or wind that would rise, and people would say, oh well, Crocker's going to take a soul tonight. And there was a fellow that had to cross that river because his mother was sick on the other side, and he had no other choice but to do so because he was worried his mother would die in the night if he didn't do it. And when he was on his way to the river to cross, he met with an old woman, and she said to him, oh, I wouldn't cross that bridge tonight because Crocker will take a soul tonight. And he said, well, I have to because my mother is on the other side and she is unwell. And the old woman said to him, well, I saw you once free a hare from a trap, and that hare was a friend of mine. And so take this little piece of rosemary with you when you go. And he thanked her for it. And he took the piece of rosemary, and he continued on towards the river. And then as he got closer, he met with another old woman who looked a little bit different to the first one. And she said, oh, I wouldn't cross that river tonight because Crocker is planning to take a soul. And she said to him, oh, sorry.
That's all
Um,
right.
she said to him not to cross, and he said that he had to for his mother's sake. And she said, well, I saw you help this badger that had a broken leg, and that badger was a friend of mine, and so have this little sprig of parsley, and if you see Crocker, give it to him on my behalf. And so he took the parsley and thanked her and continued on. And when he was almost at the bridge, he met a third old woman, almost like the third face of fate. And she said to him, don't cross that bridge because if you do, Crocker will take a soul tonight. And he said, "Oh, I have no choice. I have to take the risk because my mother is dying on the other side of that bridge." And she said, "Well, I saw you help a fox that was being hunted, and that fox was a friend of mine. So I'm going to give you this little bunch of thyme herb. Give this to Crocker if you see him." And so the man thanked her and took the little sprig of thyme. And when he was crossing the bridge, this evil wind began to get up, and he sensed this malignant presence coming from the river, and something reached up and touched him, and he felt a shadow behind him, and he starts to run because he gets filled with a seemingly uncanny panic. And as he's running, he feels something behind him, and it's saying to him, give something to Croco, give something to me. And so as he's running, he tosses the rosemary into the water, and he gets an advantage from doing that, and he runs a bit further, and he tosses the second bundle, and the shadow falls back, and finally he tosses the third bundle, and it seems like he might have escaped from it. But all the townspeople see the weather and they say, you better go out there tonight because Crocker will have taken a victim. And the long and short of it is they find him safe on the other side of the bridge that he's managed to cross. He's still sheltering, but he's managed to get across alive. And I like that story because it sort of shows the way that the forest has both a benign and a malevolent face. It has that river that it's not a bad river, but on certain nights it wants to claim something for itself. Maybe it's because it hasn't been honored properly. We don't know why things necessarily have a malignant face, but maybe it is part of the same fate that cares about the hare and the badger and the fox, and gave the man the little posies that he escaped from the river with. That story always comes to my mind when people ask me for folklore.
That's a good one. How important would you say reverence for nature is in traditional witchcraft?
Reverence for nature is probably the backbone of traditional witchcraft, I would say, because everything is a person. Like the concept of animism is the backbone, I would say, of traditional craft. Like trees are people, hares, badgers, foxes, they're all people that are just the same as us in the sense that we are all people. And that to me is part of why I like that story, I guess. It's that it acknowledges the personhood of the river, the personhood of the fox, the personhood of the hare, that something can be a predator. The river can have a predator face, but we too are predators of other creatures that we eat. Even if that creature is a lettuce or a carrot, it's still
Mm.
a creature.
Yeah,
So,
that's right. Plants have spirits too, or plants have
mm,
spirit that are they could be quite profound. You could connect to the energy of a tree,
mhm,
and it will be ancient and telling and offer purification and clarity, its own story. People
mhm,
neglect that as not being a thing in spirituality, but it most definitely is.
mm.
Yeah, so um, I wanted to talk to you about like traditional practice and what is a witch's life like, or how do witches live their life? Like I said, people have their own conceptions of it. They have an idea that, well, this person's damned for sure. What is all that to you? I know, but it's still what a lot of people, consider.
Um,
But I see it as part of a bigger picture that more should take seriously and not dismiss it outright.
well, Well, I'll go back to the first question about what is a witch's day like. I mean, I suppose, like I said, I don't like to gatekeep too much. I don't like to say this is what a witch is like, but I can tell you what my life and the life of the other people that live on my Covenstead is like. And, the sacred is part of everything we do. We don't even really think of it as sacred necessarily, it's just part of our everyday life. Like when you light a fire, you bless a fire. You don't ever just light a fire. There's always a blessing of that conjures forth the warm center of your household. And when you do that, you're talking to your ancestors, you're talking to the spirits of place, you're talking to the saint that looks over your hearth, you're talking to all these different beings. And when you do that, your fire is different to other fires. It's not just the same as any other fire. It becomes visible in the other world when you bless it. And that's the power that humans have. That
And
to
and fire is quite powerful. So the title I named this episode is "Walking by Witchfire." What is Witchfire? I'll let
That's
you
not
answer that.
um well, some traditions would link it with the Watchers, who were a type of angel, are a type of angel, who gave witchfire to the daughters of man. Um, it is part of the current that's passed down from witch to witch. There's it's a fire. It's not the same as elemental fire. It's more similar to gnosis. Is maybe another term that you could call it. It's a type of knowledge, a type of way of knowing something, and um, it dwells in your forehead primarily, but also in your hands as well. It can feel like a heat, but it doesn't necessarily. You can see it around people um, if your eyes have become accustomed to that. Um, yeah, look, I mean, different traditions have different stories about how we received it. I mentioned the one with the Watchers and the Daughters of Man because that's quite a common one for a lot of traditions to talk about. Paul Hewson mentions it in Mastering Witchcraft, and I try to communicate using things that I know have been published. I don't talk about the things that I've been, oath bound not to talk about. I only mention the things that I know are already in the world, of discussion. And some people believe that witch fire comes from the good folk, as opposed to angels. Every current has a different story behind it. So yes, it's I guess you could compare it a little bit to Prometheus's fire. I don't particularly have a great backing in classical mythology, but I suppose it's a bit like that in the sense that it is a gift that was given to some of mankind, or humankind, I should say, but not to everyone. But it's not, when I say that, it's not an elitist thing. It's just basically that not everybody wants it or invites it to themselves. Um, does that answer the question?
Yes, that's great. Thank you so much. How important would you say being actually initiated into a current if you have some sort of spiritual ability actually is?
I think it's very grounding. I would say that real initiation happens outside the bounds of any human situation. It happens between the spirits and a person. But there's a really big capital but attached to that. God, it's really easy to go crazy. Like, I've seen a lot of people lose touch with reality who didn't have that grounding. Then, when I say grounding, I don't just mean to ground and center, I mean actually being accountable to other people and how what you do affects other people and how what you do is linked to tradition and what was passed down. There's a kind of I have a lot of stuff going on in Saturn in my birth chart. So I suppose maybe that's why I'm attracted to that sense of, I think they're holy limits. Like the things that a tradition passes down to you, they're things that discipline you. They discipline your mind and your consciousness so that you don't just spit out magic everywhere. You have a format for it. You have a grounded practice which is passed down. And I think in that way, it is not necessary to be initiated into a current to call yourself a witch, but it is very helpful. That would be.
From from my observation, when people maybe don't maybe innately come from a family tradition, but find themselves with ability, um, they spirits of various kinds are drawn to them. Sometimes it could be a helpful ancestral spirit, but other times it could be a discarnate spirit that pretends to be something else, which is, the case with Reiki. People get initiated into that. Um, I find when they get help connected to the current, they are protected within by the spirits within that current. So
Yes,
malevolent
yes.
ones cannot get them and make them go crazy, like many ceremonial magicians do. Because in that tradition, it's basically type of every man for themselves, do everything yourself type of thing and experiment. And often it does blow up. I recently read a post that said like maybe 90% of the people doing that, they end up becoming alcoholics or drug addicts or things like that, because they don't have that structure from a community like you
Mm.
said. So that's what I've observed.
Yes, you're totally right. I think it's so important that people, you need to have a community. Even if you don't have a current, you still need to serve something. You can't just have these powers for yourself. It's not for you. Like these powers, they are to serve a community. And unless you have to do something for someone other than yourself, then it's likely that you will lose touch with reality. And I do think that traditional witchcraft, the way I practice it and have experienced it from other people, don't get me wrong, I've experienced it done wrong too. I'm not saying it's this pure thing that exists in this wonderful oasis. It can be done wrong too. But I also think that it has something to offer to the world of Western occult traditions. I think because it is the repressed, it's very much like the return of the repressed in psychology. It has to come back. You can't just push something down and expect it to go away. Like if you push something down for long enough, whether that be the feminine principle, whether that be intuition, whether that be instinct, whether that be the underworld, whatever it is that you want to push down, at some point that's going to rise back up again. And I feel that that's what's happening right now. I think that's why there is this huge interest in witchcraft. That's why I don't say no to any of it, even the bits that seem frankly absurd to me. I don't say no to them because at the end of the day, I don't know what function they're serving. I have a humility about it. I look at it and I go, well, okay, even TikTok witchcraft must be here for something. I don't know what it is exactly, but I also don't claim to know what the mission of witchcraft is as a whole.
I
I think
see.
it's bigger than me. I don't claim to know its whole agenda.
But I want to point out too that maybe a lot of people have this idea that people practice traditional witchcraft to gain power or get stuff in the material world. But you live very simply. Is that
I
correct?
do. I do, yeah. I mean, I would like to I like to travel but most of the time, if I travel, I have to work. I have to go there and do numerous workshops or healings or events and things so that I can afford to travel. I'm certainly not what I would call wealthy. I do know witches that are wealthy, though. It's just, it doesn't happen very often, it seems. Mainly, I guess, because most of us are serving witchcraft. We're not here to make ourselves wealthy first and foremost. Like, if I did have wealth, I'd be using it for what I'm working towards already. I'd put it back into our covenstead. I'd put it into networking with other people. Yeah, I wouldn't use it for myself as such.
Right, and you mentioned that it has a healing aspect to it too. How does that work?
It
People don't
does.
usually associate healing with witchcraft, and if you mentioned it, they would think, "Oh, it's not really healing." It's people have their own ideas. But go ahead.
Um, that's a specialty of mine. That's not all witches that do
Mhm.
that. You know, some people have finding lost objects as their specialty, or you know what I mean. Like, there's a
Sure.
power that's passed down in certain lineages, and I have a folk doctoring practice that I've sort of developed out of a mixture of spirit-led activity and also trying to resurrect some fairy doctoring practices, but that's kind of a me thing. It's not specific to all witches.
Can you talk about fairies a little bit? I know people are curious about that now that you mentioned it.
What would you like me to talk
I
about them in
I I don't
particular?
I don't know the beginning. First, are they real? I I know, but for everyone else.
I experience them to be real. Certainly, I wouldn't. Yeah, I wouldn't want to say otherwise.
Yeah, neither would I. I mean, it's one of those things that I've been
They're
seeing and
they're
talking about for a long time. What are they
I'll
like?
put it this way, well, they were much more fearsome in their original folkloric stories than they're made out to be in modern. You know, that they're not cute necessarily. Like, they can appear in all different forms. They are masters of glamour. Um, you know, they do help you to heal people, but also they are the cause sometimes of the things that you're healing. Sometimes they are fairy blights or elf darts that have been flicked into people that you
Mhm.
remove. They're just like us, actually. I think they're just like humans in the fact that they have evil doers and they have people who do good and they have people who do both. Um,
So
really, I don't.
that sort of comes full circle into the story I told in the
Mm,
beginning of the show about how, um, um, the spiritual afflictions can affect physical health,
yes, absolutely. Mm.
especially by not honoring nature. Would
Mm.
you like to speak about that a little bit and the importance of it?
Absolutely, yes. I mean, fairy blight, for instance, is a thing that people get for being in the wrong place at the wrong time of night, in the wrong pathways where something is passing through. They might not have even seen it, but it touches them. And after that point, they become weaker and sick. And, you know, for instance, like in the past, things that we class as arthritic pains were often seen as elf darts and were suctioned out and removed. Even in Britain, which people don't think about that, it's a British thing. They think about it as a shamanic thing, you know, the suctioning out, like actually sucking out a
Mhm.
thing and disposing of it. That happened in England. We've got records of folk doctors and fairy doctors removing things like that from people's bodies. Um, so yeah, I mean, the good folk, they're-
Good folk.
the good folk. That's what we call them. Yeah, um, they are like us. They're just as bad and just as good as humans, I think.
So I do this all the time. People, gosh, they have such a weird concept of killing and purification and what I do when I remove stuff from their energetic bodies, which is basically the stuff you're talking about. These aren't like physical darts, like blown through a straw. They're energetic. It's hard to explain, right? Because it's real, it's perceivable, it has form, but it's still energetic. And it affects the energetic bodies that affect the physical body. And when I do a purification, I'm removing this stuff, which is why
Hmm.
people feel better very, very quickly.
Yes.
Um, people, I have trouble getting people to understand that. I'm not sure that they need to, but understanding like spiritual health and how environment interacts with it, I believe that it's important. I mean, it is important to maintain balance and physical well-being just as much as it is important to eat healthy and exercise
Hmm.
at least a little bit every week.
Absolutely, it is so important. And yes, I think that's where story comes in for me, though, why story is so important to my practice. Because putting something like what you're calling an intrusion or an energy blockage, I describe as an elf dart.
No,
And
it's definitely an elf dart. I usually communicate it in a different way for people,
oh, me
but
too. I have
there's
all different languages and all different stories for different people. I try to work out what they believe when I first start the session, and then I try to story everything in the way that will make sense to them in their belief system. Um, but that's a lot of hard work that our ancestors didn't have to do. I
oh
think when
gosh.
people went to a healer, they would have just said, "Oh, look, you've got an elf dart up there in your back. I'm going to suck it out, and then we're going to put some of this silver water on the spot, and then I want you to take an old garment and hang it up near the river until it decomposes, and your problem will be gone." And people would go, "Excellent," and it would be very simple. But today it's complicated. I'm trying to resurrect these practices because I feel they're really important.
Yeah, so do I for sure, for sure. And I
Mm.
think that's also important why other spiritual practitioners come together too, so they have a common language and they don't dismiss these things.
Mhm.
Like, I've had people come to me who were clearly actually had like you know, a real curse where they were
Mm.
being haunted
Yes.
that they didn't believe any of that. I had one lady who messaged me and says, "I'm an attorney. Don't publicize this. Don't if you do, don't cover my name. I can't let
Mm.
people know this." But I was investigating a politician. We're both Republicans, running in a certain state, and she's threatened me, said, "Hey, if you don't stop investigating me, I am going to do a curse to you." She said I laughed it off, but this person did, and I started, like, hearing my baby, my infant, like, start cursing me out and all these other things that she was describing, and when I looked, sure enough, I mean, whoever did this, was legit. And
Hmm.
this wasn't a person who had anything to gain by sharing the story with me. This is
Hmm.
someone who needed help and needed
Hmm.
it to be anonymous. So I took care of it, and when I did, she could feel invisible chains removing themselves, unwrapping themselves from her body, and I was able
Hmm.
to free her from it. But she would go to other places, and I think she did a few times, and they would just tell her, "You're not cursed. Those things aren't real." What I'm trying to educate people on, yes, when most people say, "I'm going to curse you," it's probably not going to do that much, right? You might just kind of feel like, why would that person want to curse me? That's awful. But 3% of the time, 2% of the time, when somebody says that they can do that or they're doing it, I mean, there's something there.
Mm. I have similar experience in my own practice because I do a sort of a distance folk doctoring, and it has its limits, I have to say. Like, if the person can work with me to help me get rid of the problem, I can help them from a distance. But I have to say, with curses, it is, I don't know, I wouldn't want to put a number on it, but I would say that most people think they're cursed but are not. But
This
every
is
now and
true.
again,
Absolutely.
you find someone that is. And as you said, it sometimes comes from sources that you wouldn't expect. You wouldn't think that somebody connected with the Republican Party, for instance, would be capable of wielding that power, but some of them can.
Yes,
It's actually true
absolutely.
and disturbing.
I had one lady say she's haunted. There's like things moving around her apartment.
Mhm.
And it's like, "Okay, no problem." Got rid of it, and she said, "I thought I was going crazy. Thank you so much." So these are actually things that I hope that, people start taking more seriously when people say they are. Like you
Mhm.
said, often they're not. Sometimes they're just going through a little bit bad luck, but it is
I
not
still
the
treat it like
horrific
it's
stuff.
real, though. I still treat it like it's real no matter what.
Yeah,
Like, I
absolutely.
still like, because it makes the person feel better, and that's magic in itself
Well
sometimes.
well well, how purification works in the Shinto type of idea of purification is that whenever there is some type of defilement or somebody is going through an ailment, there's an evil spirit behind that, within a certain context to a certain extent, whether it's just kind of like, a Mass Effect that happened generations ago or um, a domino effect from something that happened to something else. Somebody does that make sense? Or because
Yes.
somebody's living in like a certain area and they're in the wrong place at the wrong time and they get hit
Mhm.
with a fairy dart, for example.
Mhm.
So when I do a purification, it starts addressing that too, and people could feel it, which is why I do this every day, and things are gaining momentum, and why I'm starting to bring other people in so they could kind of share their knowledge and their experiences because the same type of principle, because people feel it from me, they tend to listen to folks I bring in and ask to explain things a certain way,
Mhm.
which you are. Yeah, so I guess so. You have a healing practice, and can you kind of speak? I know people are really interested in it. I have a lot of older folks who come here who
Mhm.
have had arthritis and things like that. Can you explain your process?
Yes, I mean, I take about an hour and a half to do the whole thing, and I start off with a reading because I find that that's and it's just an idiosyncratic thing that I do where I throw down some tarot cards for the person, and then I get them to throw a bunch of my collection casting on top, and where they fall on the cards allows me to read a story for this person. And usually, while we're doing that, I'm kind of already tapping into them. I'm already starting to, because I kind of ask their permission at the beginning. I'm sort of like, do you mind if I talk to the spirits that are around you? Do you mind if and I might word that differently because I have worked on some people that don't believe the same things that I do. So I might just say to them, is it okay if I, do my practice on you or something, depending on what they believe. And so they give me their permission, and I start to make that contact during the reading. And I ask permission to work on the person because you need to do that. Sometimes there's spirits that don't want you to work on them, for instance, like they might actually
Mhm.
to maintain control over that situation. And a lot of that I try to keep to myself, though. I don't I don't want to alarm the person, so I try to make everything seem quite positive. And I get them quite relaxed. I get them to put their feet in some hot water, like a bucket of hot water that I bring in, and I use certain herbs to smoke them down, and I drum over them, I rattle them, and all these things that I'm doing at the whole time I'm talking to my spirits, and I'm
Mhm.
talking to the spirits around them. Sometimes I'm negotiating with them. I'm offering them something to leave sometimes. Like sometimes they want something, done. It might be really simple, like they might want a piece of information conveyed to the person that I might need to tell the person, hey, by the way, your grandfather wanted to leave you money in his will, but he wasn't able to because he died before he could do it. Or, there might just be something that they need passed on, which allows that person to then let that person go. Um, yeah, or there I might find that there is a blockage, because usually people tell you. I find I don't even need to do a lot of work on the person. They usually come in and tell me there's something stuck in my back, or there's something,
Mhm.
you know what I mean, like there's something that's in the way for me. And often it is as simple as me just asking permission, and often their ancestors give me permission, and I then use what I would class, I suppose, as my Witchfire to warm up in my hands, and then I encourage that thing to leave their body, and I pull it out through their fingers or through their toes, or and I actually lay my hands on and I brush it down until it leaves, and then I might encourage it to get into a bottle or something, which I use to help it leave the property. I use a lot of folkloric things in that. Like I might put it into a bottle that has, certain things in it to encourage it to stay, or that's kind of the gist of it, I guess.
Now, are they always human spirits, or are there other types of spirits that the person are, maybe affected by, or maybe even tormenting the person?
Well, yes, it depends on the person. I mean, I've certainly dealt with everything from, like, if I'm working on another witch, for instance, which I do on the regular, because people
Mm,
sometimes need another set of eyes to look at them.
100%, always.
Yeah, and often then I'm dealing with angelic entities. I'm dealing with the good folk. I'm dealing with all sorts of things. But sometimes I'm also dealing with what I like to call them parasites, because of the word demonic sounds a little bit too alarming, but they are, you know,
Demons, yeah.
malevolent. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
malevolent entities, and I've dealt with all of those things over the years. I
right.
just find
So that sort of confuses people, especially, well, when they hear the word witch, they're thinking, "Why are you removing demons when you're doing that yourself?" But I try to I try to articulate how vast and varied the unseen world actually is. Like, there's not one group of one thing that are always just one thing. Would you
mm,
agree with that?
yes, I mean, I remove anything which is not there to help the person. It's as
Mhm.
simple as that. Like, if that thing is getting in their way of their development, and it is taking their energy away, or getting in the way of them achieving their destiny, or, I remove it. That being said, I've also come across witches that have pacts with demonic entities that they, work certain arrangements with. So yeah, it's context. I think it depends where that thing shows up. If it shows up messing with somebody, then I remove it.
How many people, or what percentage of people would you say are doing these pacts and things, or specific ones, or making any agreements that they absolutely don't understand?
I really am not sure. I couldn't give you a number for that. I would
Mm.
definitely say that I've treated people who got into situations they didn't understand. Absolutely. I don't. I couldn't give you a percentage though,
It.
because I don't think I'm meeting everybody. I think I'm meeting a particular demographic.
Mhm. Oh, geez, I'm meeting so many people. Like, I will tell you, many people in the new age type of space, which are um, quite regularly dismissed by those who maybe practice witchcraft or some type of tradition. They're making all these agreements with these things that they don't understand, and they think they're passing on this profound wisdom, but it's really just junk, and they are giving up more than they can really kind of comprehend. So that's a thing that's quite prevalent, that many of us who do these type of centuries or even millennium old practices just kind of write off and not pay much attention to. But there's 100%, there's stuff going on, and a lot of people without any guidance, or the wrong guidance, are putting themselves in a really, really bad position. So that's just that's just my perspective and what I've observed through the years. I actually remove, um, just to give you an example, for a handful of years, every year, I would go to the New Age Conscious Life Expo and do my purifications in a big room, and there would always be all these people with all this horrible stuff implanted into their energetic bodies that I would disseminate. But right after that, they would just go back to the things they were doing before and not really listening to the stuff I'm telling them, which is why I decided to create this. Because at the end of the day, that stuff doesn't have much substance. It has no history. It has no precedent. So the idea was that maybe when people kind of get that type of information or access to this knowledge, their understanding will grow with that a little bit more. So that's my.
Mm. I certainly hope so. I mean, I don't get approached, oddly. I don't really get approached by many people that would come from what you'd call the new age community. I tend to attract a
Well,
very
that's because you.
particular
That's.
demographic.
Oh, I mean, honestly, they'd be terrified of you.
That's funny because I'm
They're
so lovely.
scared by the title, and in their minds, witchcraft doesn't necessarily exist in the way that it does. So there's a current, um, there's a current within, maybe you're aware, because it exists in England, it exists all over the Western world, that comes from the 18th century. That's the type of spiritualist type of seance movement, which is where many of the modern mediums come from. They're within that current. So
Mm,
they're protected, but it closes off their perception to be quite narrow.
mm,
Um, so I don't I don't remember where my train of thought was headed with that, but it has a big influence on people because they experience that. And because they experience it in a very lighthearted, loving way, they take it as ultimate truth. But at the
mm,
same time, the same people will say, well, these curses and like entities like blowing darts and people, that doesn't exist because they can't perceive it.
mm.
So,
Yes, I would agree. I think that that's one of the reasons why I feel that there is like a comeback movement, I suppose, for witchcraft at the moment. I feel like it has something to offer in that realm, like in terms of reminding people of a sense of gravitas, I guess, about it, that there is like a seriousness to this practice. And yeah, I'm happy
and
to be
it's,
helping people to recognize it.
I call it the chains of perception. And as you, if And the idea is that if you stay on one link of that chain, you're only going to be able to perceive what's on that chain
Mm, mm.
until you move to the next one and the next one and the next one, and you'll be able to see more. And
That's what
they also branch out in different directions too. And
mm,
that, take them seriously. There are ways to verify the information you get. And
yes.
too, and that's basically through purification and fire and that sort of thing, which I think is time for us to do right now.
Okay.
So I'm not sure if Lee, if you look through my channel and look me up, see what I kind of do, but I do a Shinto based purification.
Mm,
And Shinto is a system. Yes, it's nature, interacts with nature spirits and it's reverence to nature. But the core practice, how it's supposed to be esoterically, is purification of the self and pulling these energetic impurities out of um, uh, the energetic bodies or the soul, as you would call it.
mhm.
So, and part of that is being able to do it for big groups of people and also work with other healers, so that they can kind of ride on that current and it spreads to everyone else here.
Okay.
So just do your thing. You're gonna hear me speak some Japanese. Do you do any incantations or anything like that,
Not in
or can you
public,
do everything
but
silent?
I can still do the work without doing the
Silently.
incantation. Mm,
Okay. All right. So here we go, everyone. This normal thing that we always do. Amaterasu mi oyano. Everyone try to relax. Kami no misu maru no inochi terashi kuni shizuka nari Amaterasu mi oyano kami no misu maru no inochi terashi kuni shizuka nari. Taka amahari ni kamazamarimasu. Kamarogi, kamarami no mikoto mo shite. Sumemi oyakama, izanagi no kami, tsukushi no himaka no tachibana no odo no awagigahara ni misoki, harai, tamaishi, toki ni aremaseru. Harai do no okami tachi, moro moro no maga goto tsumi kairi yo. Harai tamai kiyome tamai to mausu koto no yoshi yo. Amatsu kami, kunitsu kami, yao, yoruzu no kami tachi tomo ni hikoshimasu to. Kashikomi, kashikomi mo maosu. Taka amahari ni kamazamarimasu. Kamaroki, kamaromi no mikoto mo shite. Sumemi oyakama, izanagi no kami, tsukushi no himaka no tachibana no odo no awagigahara ni misogi, harai, tamaishi, toki ni aremaseru. Harai do no okami tachi, moro moro no ma ga goto tsumi kairi yo. Harai tamai kiyome tamai to mausu koto no yoshi yo. Amatsu kami, kunitsu kami, yao, yoruzu no kami tachi tomo ni hikoshimasu to. Kashikomi, kashikomi mo mausu. Dozo no kami, amaterasu. Sumemi kami no memori o tsutaete oshie michibiki no tamawaku. Hito wa sunowachi 神と神とのもとのありじたり、何時らの紳士の痛ましむることなかれ。この家に目にもろもろの風情を見て、心にもろもろの風情を見ず、耳にもろもろの風情に触れて、心にもろもろの風情に触れず、心にもろもろの風情を思とも、中心にもろもろの風情を思わず、この時に清く潔きことあり、もろもろのノリは影と形のことし、清く気を切れば汚れることなし、ことを取らばうべからず、皆花よりずの実となる。若みはすなわち六根処女なり、六根処女なるがゆえに、ごぞの真剣兄なり、ごぞの真剣兄なりが、ゆえに天地の神と男なり、天地の神と男なるが、ゆえに万物の霊と体なり、万物の霊と体なるが、ゆえになすところにごて成就せずということなし、無常霊法、真珠仏教、天上無休、名二章、金が律、払いたまい、清めたまい、守りたまい、先はいたまい、照らしたまい、導きたまい。高間の腹にかむずまります。すめ神たち、いやわらしたも、時すの水の宝持ちて、あまてる国てるひけ雨のほあかり、くしたま、ねぎはやひのみことり、しずけたもこと教えてのたまわく、いましこの水の宝持ちて、中つくににあま下り、あうひとぐさ沈め収めよ。会う人草および、よりずのものの病のことあらば、神宝を持ちて、見下いた沈みに起きて、見たま沈みの祭りをなして水の宝を振るべ、そのかむほぎの言葉に曰く、木のい木のと、火のい火のと、土のい土のと、かのいかのと、水のい水のと、ひふみよいむなやことにのとふるべゆらゆやとゆらかく祈りせばまかるともさらにきなんとしとも雨の神の実を読みことのりかけとまいて、雨の意は船に乗りて、河内の国の川上の軽亀に天下りましまして、山本の国、引きの山のふもと、白庭の高庭に移しましまして、いつき祭りとも、名付けて、イスの神のお神ともしたて祭り。よよかむ宝を持ちて、よりずのもののために、古べのかまごと持ちて、しかすなしとゆえの古の見た目の神と、敬い、たて祭り。せめみこと、おまらじ、おとろその神たけきを持ちて、いつきに使い祭りとも、もののびの神のやしろ、雨がした、よりずのものたごいなり、いてもとかむ宝は、いわゆる、おきつ鏡。平津鏡、やつぐの剣、幾玉、たる玉、まかるが石の玉、ちいが石の玉、おろちのひれ、八のひれ、くすぐすのもののひれ、さらに、とくずの神、木のい木のと、火のい火のと、土のい土のと、かのいかのと、水のい水のと、ひふみよいぶ、なやこと。にのとふるべゆらとゆら。かしたてまつることのよしをもちて、平ら結くきこしめすと、命長く、子孫はね、時はかきわに、守りたまい、先はいたまい、かじたてまつり、人通人名心力かじ、かんながらたまちやませ。かんながらたまちやませ。かんながらたまちやませ。All right, there we have it. Well, I definitely felt that.
Hmm.
I might have to have you look at me a little later, Lee.
Uh, we should
Okay,
do that.
yeah,
Reci-
absolutely. Yeah, I mean,
Reciprocally, maybe.
well, it's needed because I think that I've met healers and people kind of in the spiritual community that think that they could just always heal themselves.
Mm. You can't. Sometimes you definitely need someone else to look over you.
Well, you get blindsided by stuff, and when I say that, please, guys, don't do Reiki. I was trying to get to that in the beginning. In Japanese folklore, there's other parts of it. I'm trying to be, not disarm people too much. But the other end of it is basically a realm of demons. It lights up the energy bodies and like lodges stuff, pollutants like deep inside the energetic bodies. It's really awful, and you'll notice that a lot of people practice that, especially every day. If they have the mechanism to move that energy, especially, they'll end up getting very, very sick. They have an idea that because they're working on someone, that they're taking on their stuff, which there's some of that because you're connected to the energy, but no, it's what they're channeling. So, right before we end, I do have a question from one of my patrons, and he wants to know what practices in witchcraft are safe and don't conflict with other traditions.
Um, I think that working on your fetch, which I call the divine animal of your body, is probably safe for everybody. The idea that the modern world has sort of squashed the animal nature of humans in certain ways, and I think that witchcraft provides you with lots of very safe ways of just thinking about what does the animal of your body want today. Like maybe you need to just exercise some of your senses in a really innocent way, like taking off your shoes and walking on the grass and eating something that you enjoy, and just like thinking about what does your body want to do today, particularly if it's the weekend and you've got some time, like where you can sort of listen to yourself. And I think a lot of us are getting damaged in the world by the fact that we're not able to listen to our bodies because of clocks and time. And, I think we need to sometimes take a little fetch holiday where we can let that, um, we class the animal of the body as having a divine presence, something which is holy. And I think we share that with a lot of indigenous cultures too, the idea that there is a ancestor spirit behind each animal. And I would definitely say that is a very safe aspect of witchcraft that you can enjoy.
Okay, now I want to ask you this. When it comes to Shinto, there's a lot to it when it comes to venerating nature and the spirits and pacifying those around you. What is the best way to start maybe forming a relationship with spirits in your area so like they might not blow a dart into your
I'm
neck
just
when you're
gonna
on a hike?
warn you. Sorry, I just need to warn you that I'm beginning to run out of power on my phone, so I don't know if
Okay.
I'm, yeah. But I would say pour an offering, maybe. Like start off with a gift to the place. Pour some milk at the base of a tree and ask the place, like acknowledge it as a person, acknowledge the place and the tree as a person, and give them something, and just sort of say, I see you there. Would you like to work with me?
Okay. Would you recommend like creating an altar or something like that for like maybe in your backyard?
You could do, but I think the most natural ones are the best. I'd find some hollow place to pour an offering without changing the place too much, if you know what I mean, like keeping it natural.
Or maybe at like a crossroads, perhaps.
Well, that's nice too. Yeah, an old tree stump at crossroads.
Yeah, I know we're running out of time because especially since your battery's running running out.
Yeah,
But
I'm surprised actually, but I guess
cro-
it's been on
cross
video. a long time.
Crossroads are pretty significant in traditional witchcraft, aren't they?
They are, yes.
Can you share your perspective on that before we take off out of here?
Well, Crossroads is a
Because
place
because
where
sorry, because we're at a kind of a crossroads in humanity, right?
we
So
are absolutely. A crossroads is a place where everything meets up. And what I said before about the devil and wholeness, I feel a crossroads is a place for wholeness. There is a room for your left hand and your right hand. There's what's behind you and what's in front of you. And each of those things represents part of the whole being that a human can become. And yes, crossroads are holy for that reason to me.
all right. And if people want to find you, I do want to let you talk about some of the stuff you're doing, especially workshops and books and classes that you might be teaching. I think it's only fair. So can you go ahead and please share those?
Well, there's my Patreon, which is always great to support me over there. I have a bunch of books that are out there. There is A Deed Without a Name, which is probably my most well-known one. But there's also things like Standing and Not Falling, which are a bit more practical. Like that book is a bit more of a self-help for witches kind of book. Yeah, you can find me at leemorgansbooks.com.
How many
That's my
books have you how many books have you written?
um counting them on my fingers. It depends if you count my fiction as well, because I write novels as well as nonfiction. I guess I've written four nonfiction books and four novels.
Great. And you're also teaching a class, right?
I am teaching a class called Flight, Fetch, and Familiars at the
Oh,
moment.
we haven't even talked about familiars. Oh, I'm gonna have to have you
We
back
haven't.
on.
I'm running out of stamina.
All right. So Lee, thank you. Go ahead. What's the site? What's the course called? Sorry to cut you off.
It's called Flight, Fetch, and Familiars, and that is run through the Blackthorn School.
All right.
That helps.
All right. Well, Lee, thank you so much for being here. For anyone watching, read folklore, study folklore, look into some of the more of the traditional type of, spiritual practices. They're not all dogmatic like we experience in the West. They're actually quite open-minded, and they teach us to do things with discernment. Um, Same as folklore. I think folklore is very, very important because it tells us or it gives hints to us and helps us map out the unseen world in a way that we can sort of live it and navigate it better. Because a lot of these things, they have warnings and stories for the modern world, which the modern world has sort of turned into aesthetic. So yeah, thank you again, Lee, so much.
You're
Um,
most welcome.
this has been Folklore After Dark. I will see you all next time.